You are listening to the Mindset School Podcast, episode 35. Hey friends, welcome to the Mindset School Podcast with Peggy Easterling, where we learn to smile authentically from the inside out. Are you exhausted from the relentless pursuit of unfulfilling dreams and the attempt to micromanage your own life? Well, guess what? Trusting in God's timing and purpose can be your path to genuine peace and fulfillment. Picture a life where God's glory takes center stage and you become a vessel of His plan. It's time to release that heavy burden of control and surrender to His flawless timing. Join us on this transformational journey in the life of Teri Seiler and this overcoming story where God gets all of the glory. Hey, Teri, how are you today?
Hey, I'm great. Thank you.
Teri, I'm so excited to have my listeners hear your story today. But first, do you mind telling them just a little bit about yourself?
Not at all. I'm Teri Seiler. I live in Fort Worth, Texas with my husband of 44 years and get to live close to an adult daughter and then have a couple more kids off a little bit further away from here and two beautiful grandchildren and one on the way, which makes three. So that's my greatest claim to fame. But other than that, I'm a woman who loves Jesus and wants to get out and help other people that are struggling in some of the areas that I have struggled in.
We met in an online space and I've done a summit with you, and it was so powerful working alongside of you and hearing your heart and hearing the changes that God has done in your life. And such a beautiful story of redemption. Do you mind starting from the beginning and sharing a piece of that with us here today?
Yeah, not at all. Boy, I was thinking about this. And when you say, where do you start? It's like, where do you start in when you're talking about your journey? And I have to say, it started back when my dad put me on top of a chair in front of the pulpit and I sang. And music became a very important part of my life from then on. I come from a musical family and from a family that is in the ministry. My father was preacher and a lot of other people in my family have been. So ministry was also something that was very deep in my heart. And I carried that into adulthood. But I got married young and had my kids right off the bat. So those first few years were spent being a mom and volunteering in the ministry and what have you from there. And I loved those years. But as I got into where my kids were getting close to high school years, I felt God's tug. I felt His tug saying, you know what? It's time to move into another season of your life. And I want to use you in the ministry. And I've always known, I just always have known that God would use me somehow in the ministry. And my heart first went to teaching. And several years there of rejections in some areas, I volunteered a lot and taught music and whatever in the grade school, but I was missing a degree. And there were a lot of rejections as far as moving forward into a more deeper way. So I went back and got my degree, and God opened up some opportunities for me to teach music. And first year or so was in a public school setting, and I just had a hard time because a gag is put on you when you're in the public school system, and I couldn't tell the kids about those songs that dealt with God and so much truth. And we couldn't delve into that. So after that, I was able to teach in a private school setting. And from there, the ministry took off. I was able to take my kids to different churches. We would do entire church services, and my soul was just fed. It was just fed. But about 5 years into my teaching, and I'm in my 40s now, 5 years into my teaching, I experienced burnout. And that started a whole new journey for me. All of a sudden, I'm faced with God. I thought this is what you wanted me to do. I spent so many years thinking about this and having this be, yeah, this is the desires of my heart, the passions that you put in my heart. And now I'm faced with, how do I go on? And I wasn't ready to let go, wasn't ready to give that up. So I went probably another 3 years after I actually experienced burnout. 3 years where I just hung on, and every day I'd go in and in between classes would go in and shut the door and just weep because I knew I had lost something very dear and just want to let go of it. But after 3 years, I had to. It was just too much for me to do. The anxiety that I was feeling, waking up at night, it was too much. And plus, God said, okay, it's time. So I was left with kind of no purpose, wow, what do I do now? I'm in my 50s now, right? And what do I do, God? Are you done with me? Why did this happen? I didn't understand a lot of it. But for a couple of years, on and off, God was putting me in a waiting room. And it was in that waiting room of God that I discovered the most amazing truth that you're doing right now. And that is that God had a lot of work to do on me in my mindset. And I did experience a lot of healing and such a precious time with Jesus during that time. Our relationship grew so strong because I was lost. I had lost my identity. For all these years, I'd been a mom, and then that changed into being a teacher and of a wife. And all of a sudden, I'm just feeling like most of that identity is lost. And God, through mindset change, showed me that is not where my identity laid, and that it was wholly and completely in Him. These years lasted probably another 10, 15 years of a journey. I went back during that time and got my degree in music and worship. And at that time, I was, probably in my mid 50s now. And I'm like, okay, Lord, I know there's probably not a lot of people that want a worship pastor, but this is what I really believe that you want me to do. And I had felt that from a long time ago. The teaching, was so wonderful, and I was able to tap into that ministry, but I knew God wanted me to be a worship pastor. There was no doubt. There was an opportunity when I was a chaplain at one of the schools, teaching music and doing chaplaincy. There was a time when I would go to the meetings at the church where all the pastors would meet together. And it was like, this is it. This is finally that square peg going into the square hole, not trying to be pushed into a round hole. And I just knew that's where I belonged. So when I went back to school, I just trusted God. I said, God, you'll open something up if this is what it's to be. And so sure enough, after probably a year or so, God actually did open up an opportunity for me to be a worship pastor. And finally, I was coming out of the waiting room, and I could not have been just more grateful. And I just knew this is it. This is it. So I went to North Carolina and I went up to a church up there. The pastor, who is also a friend, had warned me that it's not going to be easy. Said, we got some things going on in this church, but we need you. We want to try this. They had never had a paid worship pastor before, so they funded it through just their church, and I went up there. And 5 months later, God told me, it's time to leave, Teri. It's time. And I argued with him. I told him, this can't be, God. I'm getting close to my 60s. I'm a few years away from that, but I'm getting close. Never again will I ever be able to be a worship pastor. I know this is what you've been grooming me for all these years. Why? But when you hear God's voice and you know he's telling you to do something, you do it. And so I left and came back to Texas. My husband, he was going to be joining me up there. And the timing was just about the time when he was ready to leave the work and do that. So God's timing is perfect, that's for sure. But outside of anything that has happened in my life, I think that this threw me more than anything else, because I felt, is everything I thought I heard God say to me, was it all wrong? And why did he have me go back and do the worship pastor, degree and all of that? And why, Lord? And I began to understand on this end of things now, as I look back, that my mindset kept me in that place of despair, that my mindset was telling me I did something wrong. I disappointed God somehow, some way. I'm the one that did this, because I knew in my heart God's faithfulness. I knew he loved me, but somehow I had to have disappointed him. And would he ever use me again? Am I done? And I felt this heaviness, and it threw me into a pretty deep darkness in my life. And I began to just think that this was it. I had no more relevance in my life. And I'll just exist. Because for me, no, if I don't have any purpose and I'm not out there doing what God had for me, then what purpose do I have as far as that goes? So God did something for me during that time. He gave me a text, and it's probably your theme text, but it was, let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. And he finally got through to me. He finally got through to me that he had some work to do in me first before I could go and do some work for him. And so that became a journey of actually changing the way I think about myself, and thinking I'm this kid that used to be clumsy, never really knew the right things to say, but when she did, everybody would laugh at her because of her naiveness. And actually it began to turn into, man, I don't want to use my voice. What if somebody thinks that I'm stupid or something? And so I began to translate that into, your voice doesn't really matter. And what happened is that God had some things for me to do. And one of them was to write a book. And do you know how hard it is to write a book if you believe that your voice doesn't matter out there? It's just next to impossible. And another thing he had for me to do was to get out there and let other women know it doesn't matter what season of life you're in. It doesn't matter. As long as you have breath, God has a purpose for you.
As you're talking, I'm like thinking of Proverbs 29:18. Without a vision, people perish.
Yes,
And when you have that thought in your head that's just ruminating and going on, and it's not serving you, it's keeping you in a car that's stuck, believing that your life has no purpose. And that place that you're in, that space, it does not serve you. But the beautiful thing is, here you were going on your journey, and I draw this out in the mindset school of the path the twists and turns that you go on, and how everyone's twists and turns of life, they're really like a big field, and we're all on our Christian faith journey, planting seeds along the way. Even when we think we're in the wrong place, someone comes across our path and we share a tiny piece of what God has planted in our heart, and we plant a seed. And then we go over here and we plant another seed, and we think we're on the wrong path the whole time, but we're planting seeds in a field on our journey, and God is using us right where we are. I'm sure you can look back at your life and look at things that were positive that happened, even though they may have been hard because they were blocked by that thought that you were having that your life was out purpose during that season.
Yes. Yes. Oh, that is so true. That is so true. And when I was at my darkest point in that thought process, like you're talking about, I remember telling my husband, I said, honey, I just feel like God has just thrown me away.
Mm.
And that very day that I'd said that to him, he said to me, he says, man, Teri, I've read something that's just really struck me. He goes, I read about how God has chosen us and for purpose. He's chosen us. And those two together, those two thoughts that God chooses us and that he doesn't throw us away. That day, we actually were going to a mega church. And that was about the only church that I could go to was a mega church, because I would want to just disappear. I didn't want anybody to see me. And the reason for that was because every time there was a praise and worship going on, my heart, I couldn't contain my emotions. Because that's what my love is for worship and for being up there and leading worship. And that's where my heart was. And I just felt like such a failure in that. So I was sitting there, and as usual, I was bawling my head off while they were up there singing. But up on the screen came, along with the words to the song, underneath was a small text that they had written. And this is what it says. And I kid you not, this is just shows God's faithfulness in these times of questioning. It said this, for I have chosen you and will not throw you away. The very day that I told my husband, I just feel like God has thrown me away, and the day that he had told me what he had read about being chosen, that's what God brought to me. I could not wait to get home and look that text up. And the amazing thing is that particular text, it had to have been my favorite version for it to have said those exact words, and it was. And so I looked it up and I read it in its entirety, and I personalized it. And this is what it said. It said, but as for you, Teri, my servant, my chosen one, my friend, I have called you back from the ends of the earth, which was North Carolina, saying, you are my servant, for I have chosen you and will not throw you away. Don't be afraid, for I am with you. Don't be discouraged, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will hold you up with my victorious right hand.
Isaiah 41.
That's right. And it was at that moment that I was freed. I was able, still chokes me up today. I was able to let go of my expectations of what I thought my life should look like and what I thought God wanted me to do. I was able to let go of them and say, all right, God, I know I'm not done. You're not done with me. So show me what you want me to do. And I'm there. And you talk about being freed. I was freed.
That's so good, Teri.
Mm-hmm.
I think that God uses us for seasons and places, and he puts us in specific places for a season and a time and a purpose in season.
Yes.
And in maybe the biggest win that he could possibly imagine for your life in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
But he had another win for you on the other side. And we get stuck because of our own expectations of what it are pictures that we paint with our own paintbrushes. I can say, even on my journey, when I started to be where I am today, I started out thinking I was going to be a licensed professional counselor, and that's how I was going to help people.
Yeah.
I'm midway, and I really started out thinking that I was going to help children as a licensed professional counselor. And I could look back and go, and people can see that I told them that was my goal and think, oh, she failed. She didn't get where she wanted to go. She's a quitter. She quit. But
Mhm.
here's the beautiful thing. I was in my car and I was driving it, right? So here's the thing. God, it's so much easier for him to use a moving car than a parked one. If you're sitting in
Yes,
a car and you're driving it, if it's in park, and it's not even cranked and going somewhere, how hard is it to steer your car, right?
that's
God
right.
orders our steps and directs our steps. And when we think we're stuck, so we park the car, put it in park, and then don't even crank the engine to go somewhere,
Mhm.
we get ourselves in a place where we're harder to steer for God to direct our steps and our path because we're
Yeah,
not listening. But He's so gracious and so amazing and so wonderful that
um,
when we get stuck, He'll send someone into our lives or a message on a screen in the middle of worship at a church that you don't even normally attend on a regular basis.
that's
And
right,
He will
that's right.
flash the words on the screen just
For
for
me.
you,
Yeah.
Teri, and
Yes. Yeah,
just for someone else out there.
yeah,
God's
yeah,
speaking to us. We just have to be willing to listen and hear the words that He's speaking to us. He loves us.
yeah,
He's never going to throw you away.
yeah,
It doesn't
yeah.
matter how discarded you seem or the things that you've gone through. If you're listening today, no matter what your story is, He sees you. He
Wow.
knows you. He loves you. It doesn't matter if you're 98 or 8. He has a purpose and a goal and a plan for your future as
Yeah.
long as your feet are planted on this earth.
Oh, it's so true. Oh, it is so true. And it's true for everybody. He is such a personal God. And that's why he says, taste and see that I am good, because you can listen to somebody talk about it all day, but until you put yourself in that relationship with him and experience it for yourself, yeah, it's hard to understand, but he does. So very personal. I love that. I think of this little lady. I had gone to church with her, and she was a fellow church member, but this was years ago. But she got very old and was put in a nursing home. And I went to visit her one day, and I see her down the hallway, and she's moving her wheelchair with her feet, handing out encouraging words and things to people as she goes down the hallway. And I think that was the first time it really dawned on me. Yeah, you cannot grow out of your purpose. It doesn't matter how old you are, even a smile, if that's all someone can give. How many times have you been encouraged just by a smile? And that is purpose, is touching people's lives. And
Yeah.
yeah, I love that, what you
When
said.
those smiles are authentic and that freedom that you have with
Mhm.
Christ, they're different. They
Yes.
really are. And it's those thoughts, like the thoughts that you were having, that
Hmm.
block us, that keep us, that root within us as a lie from Satan from the pit of the hell.
Hmm.
And those lies keep us from our purpose. Those lies keep us from seasons of life that God intends for us to be blessed in and to be blessing others. And
Oh,
in those lies that He's told us, just like you said, that identity of who we are in Christ gets skewed. And when that becomes skewed, we've got to be intentional to uproot that lie and leave it at the foot of the cross. And you are able to do that quickly. Now, sometimes it takes other people a little longer. And it's a process of really uprooting. But it sounds like that breakthrough day came for you that day. Was there also a process that followed after you saw that on the screen that day that you had to go through?
Oh, absolutely. It is not a journey for the faint of heart because you're right. You have to be intentional. And when God finally revealed to me, Teri, you're embracing lies. You are not embracing truth. Then it was a whole nother journey to learn how to embrace the truth, how to be intentional and recognize those lies when they come. And when you have a lifetime of believing those lies, it's very easy to go back to that default. And yes, absolutely. It is even today, it's continual with saying, this is not God and this is not his voice. This is the enemy trying to push me back into that insecurity that I have always felt and not being enough or not having a voice that matters and that kind of thing. And yes, oh yes, it is definitely a process.
Yeah.
But God is so faithful and he's right there to tap you on the shoulder. And if there's one thing that I've learned, he is the most patient God, incredibly patient God, because I should have learned a lot of these lessons a long time ago. but he's been so patient with me as I have learned these through my journey and still takes steps backwards. Absolutely.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I imagine imagine in your mind this physical column with the scrolls on the top, and then this beautiful piece of art with the light shining down on it. And see whatever's at that we ourselves put at the top of that platform and pedestal, that in our mindset, that's the thing that we are making the most important in our lives. And sometimes the thing that we put up there is us being small. Lord, shrink me. Lord, make me invisible. Lord, I don't want to be seen. And that doesn't honor God unless it's the next step that he's called us to. Of course, he calls us to be humble and loving and kind and surrendered. But sometimes we shrink ourselves to a place when he's calling us to a new season and into a new life and to a new place because we paint the picture ourselves and we take something that he didn't intend and we put it instead of Jesus and his blood at the top of that platform and pedestal. We put us being small. And we've got to take that down and take that to the feet of Jesus and surrender it and let him be the top of that pedestal and the platform and to see ourselves through the lens of how he sees us and our identity and lock arm in arm with him and see ourselves. And he can illuminate that next step that he called us to.
Oh,
and I don't know about you, but he's called me to big things and to doing things that are outside of my comfort zone. They're beyond me. But that's when he shows up the best, is when I am not trying to get the glory or be at the top of that platform or that pedestal. I put him there because there's no way that I belong there. I wholly surrender all of my junk to him, and he's the one that gets the glory.
Oh, absolutely. Beautifully said. And as Christian women, the church has not done us any justice by the idea of we shouldn't, in a sense, love ourselves. We're only to serve others, only to do this. But the thing that I learned, even through having my own children, is when my children put themselves down, when my children don't take care of themselves, when my children don't understand the love that I have for them, that hurts me because they are part of me and we are part of God. We are his children. And I think it hurts him when we don't think or love ourselves. He says, love others as we love ourselves, which means we do need to love ourselves. And the reason we can do that is because we are all women, children of God. When you experience that freedom of understanding, it is okay to love myself because I am so much more free to love others the way God has asked me to. We need to love ourselves, be patient with ourselves, be kind to ourselves just as much, and then we can go and do it to others.
Yeah. Loving, that is some of the work that we do in the mindset school. We talk about loving yourself and loving the person in the mirror. But the beautiful thing is, I spent years hating myself and hating that person in the mirror. But the beauty is, when I look in the mirror now, I see Christ in me. It's not even a reflection of just things and defects and flaws and the wrinkles that are coming and the gray hairs that are showing. It's
Where?
not
Let me
that
see.
anymore. It's time to color the hair again.
Yes.
Don't look too close. But the beautiful thing is, I can see Christ in me in my smile now. And if
Yes. Oh,
people,
beautiful.
I used to care what other people think on as I'm doing this and as I'm going on my journey. And I used to care way, way too much about what other people thought. But the beautiful thing, and I'm still learning this, don't think I have it perfected, is I care so much more today about what Christ thinks about me than I used to. Because his voice in my life is way more important than what someone else may think about me being on a podcast or having a platform or speaking into the lives of others. Because it's Christ who's called me to this work, and I don't need anyone else's approval. And when you get to that place in your own life, whatever God's called you to, there's freedom there. And just like you learn to trust him on your journey to set down some visions that it may have been 1000% true that he called you to ministry for every piece of that season that you were there. But he's called you to a new thing. And whatever that new thing is for our listener, I encourage you to hear Teri's words today and be willing to surrender. Whatever your mindset is about, whatever your idea is about the next step, surrender it to God. Because Teri, is it true that his way for you today has been more of a blessing than the picture that you painted in your own mind?
He just, yes, he has so much more than we could ever even imagine. And yes, it's true. And you're not able to step into that until you open your hands and say, I want all that you have for me. And I want to step into this fully and completely. And then you realize what God has is so much better than what you could have conjured up. And so he's so faithful that way. And I used to just think, okay, but couldn't you have done this a little sooner, God? Because now I'm 63 now. So maybe it could have been a little sooner. So I have it. But there was purpose in that too. Because like you said, in every season, he had me right where he wanted me in that season. And now I believe with all my heart, he has me right where he wants me in this season of my life. And the devil, boy, he tried really hard with that lie that I was too old. I'm getting close to retirement. So why are you starting to do this now? And I had to fight that lie probably harder than anything here in the last few years. And God's had people speak into my life on that. His word has spoken in, and reading about even his patriarchs, even the patriarchs, that many of them were later in life when God brought them into a new purpose. I had one friend speak into it. She said this. She said, just get over it. Okay, I think that was probably the thing that helped the most. Oh, just get over it. So
We all have that one friend, right?
that's right. That's right. Oh,
That's great.
but yeah, I did. And I did have a friend that I was thinking about it earlier when you were talking about purpose and sitting in the car. And I did have someone give me a beautiful word picture one time of if you don't really know what God's wanting you to do, then get in that sailboat and just start sailing. And if you're headed the wrong direction, he will blow the winds another way. And it was just the most beautiful word picture that I've never forgotten. If you at home are sitting there and you just don't know what God is telling you, just start sailing. He'll blow those winds another way.
That's beautiful. I love that so much. Teri, tell me about how you're helping others today, right where you're at.
Yes, my experiences with burnout brought me to a point. The thing that brought me to burnout was I just let my life get out of balance. And I'm a perfectionist, and I think that added to it because I just wanted to do my job so well that I let other things in my life get way out of balance. It destroyed my health. It destroyed my emotional health, just every area of my life it affected. Because of that, I experienced that burnout. And then years of just trying to find out what now and what's my purpose. And God has laid on my heart to work with women who are overwhelmed with life, who have found themselves in a situation of their life just being completely out of balance. Maybe they're on a fast track to burnout, or maybe they've already been there, but I help them. I coach them. I'm a life coach for those women, and want to be there and walk alongside them as a Christian coach, because I know that my journey without God in the picture, there's no way I would have made it out of there. And so I want to walk alongside them with the greatest coach that I've ever found, and that's God, and help them through those times. So
Awesome. How can they get a hold of you? I said get a hold of. There's my Texas coming
I
out.
love that. I've only heard one other person say it like that before, but that's awesome. Okay, when I tell you this, because I've told you my story, you'll know why I named it this, but they can go to my website. And the website is called Chosen for the number 4 purpose.org. So
Awesome. Chosen for
purpose.
purpose.org. And I will link that in the show notes, and make sure you guys reach out to Teri and tell her thank you for sharing her story today. And make sure you connect with her if you're looking for a life coach to help you with that overwhelm. You've got it all stacked up and you've been juggling everything and you just don't think you can help anymore. You're over it. Reach out to Teri and she would be glad to connect with you and help you through your journey. Teri, thank you again for sharing your story. It's been such an honor to hear how God's redeemed your life and your story.
Thank you, Peggy, for having me on. And you are doing amazing work. And I've been blessed today by what you said.
As always, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss an episode. If you like what you heard, I'd love to know. Leave us a review and share with a friend that could use an overcoming story so they can move closer to their purpose for their lives by renewing their mind the way God intended. Hey friends, thank you for listening. You're now done with step 1 of growing together at the Mindset School. Head over to themindsetschool.net and grab my free download where I share 5 tips when you can't hold it together anymore and continue your journey to smiling authentically from the inside out.